Here we are. It's dusk. Pleasant. The birds are gone to sleep. Not much wind. So why am I standing here? Well, I'm waiting for the producer, Mr. Cat. Any problems with the quality, you blame Mr. Cat. Alright? Email him at info@pibci.net, Mr. Cat. Tell him what he needs to do and send him some money. He doesn't respond unless he gets money. He's that type of cat, you know, he's a capitalist cat, private investment for private profit. Right, now we've got rid of the crappy humour. Important topic, it's a little bit stressful. I've noticed, because you know I'm travelling around all the time, meeting a lot of people, doing a lot of things, and I've noticed an increasing level of what you could describe as subterranean frustration and anger and violence. Things aren't the same. This is not COVID-19, when people were willing to make sacrifices in order to deal with a common enemy. This is a different type of situation. And a lot of people are paying a heavy price for this situation. So what am I talking about? I don't know if you've noticed, if you do a bit of driving or bicycling or even walking, how everybody seems to be in a rush, how nobody has any patience, how everybody seems to be going somewhere quickly, how annoyed people become with the smallest issues. So what we are seeing is not some individual problem, but it's a bigger problem. Now, in a capitalist society, a private investment for private profit society where Parliament continues to pass legislation to ensure the 1% that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication continue to profit irrespective of the economic situation, irrespective of the sacrifices the rest of the community is asked to make. Irrespective, we find that as people are pushed like cattle through automatic tellers, through supermarket self-service tellers, through hanging on to phones or sending emails that are never answered, to public servants, where we're treated like clients, customers. We're neither, we're citizens with rights and responsibilities. Even permanent residents have rights and responsibilities. But again, this private investment for private profit mantra now dominates every aspect of our existence. And when the shit hits the fan, when there is an economic crisis, when interest rates go up, when mortgages increase, when rents increase, when food increases in price, when we start to see those savings that were made by many people during COVID-19 because there was nothing to spend your money on disappear on essentials, when those credit card bills turn up and you're charged 20% interest or 22% interest, usury in anybody's. But as far as the private banks are concerned, that's normal. They say they've got problems. And then you see, during the reporting season, these large corporations increase their profits. Westpac, which is a bank I'm familiar with, has closed branches everywhere, including the Commonwealth Bank. Staff have been laid off everywhere. And we're starting to see the collapse in certain sections of society, economic collapse. But unfortunately, 99%, I should even say 99.9% of Australians internalise that anger, that frustration, that annoyance, because they believe you can't fight City Hall. They believe there's no point fighting City Hall because you're going to lose consistently. So when you internalise that anger, that frustration, what happens is your mood changes. In some situations, you become depressed. You become anxious. In other situations, you take out your frustrations on those closest to you. In other situations, you take your own life. I was interested in listening to the Victorian coroner, who was trying to explain the increase in the Victorian suicide rate post-COVID, not during COVID, but post-COVID, because of increasing, some of the contributing factors was increasing financial pressures. And increasing financial pressures is a contributing factor to suicide rates, attempted suicide rates, anxiety, depression, frustration, anger, family violence. It's all very well to put family violence down to inequality in power between people living under the same roof, but it's much more than that. It's that inequality in power that exists, which is compounds problems, especially when people see no way out and they tend to take it out on those closest to them. So 99.9% of Australians internalise their frustrations and their annoyance. The fact is that most of us still believe in the private investment for private profit mantra. We still believe that the way forward, whether it's a wage earner or even on social security beneficiary or a small business, is to continue down that track, borrow money, deal with financial institutions, attempt to deal with the problems by buying finances. And that's what you do when you borrow money. You buy money from financial institutions which have a monopoly. And there's nothing pleasant about that interaction where they want to know everything about you. And then they give you a little loan which you pay off for the next 10 years and you pay triple what you borrowed in the first place. And they act as if they're doing you a favour when you're doing them a favour. So this level, this underlying subterranean level of frustration and anger begins to boil. It's beginning to boil over, but unfortunately it boils over in many ways. If it's not through interpersonal, it's not through personal stress and depression, it's interpersonal violence or anger. And if it's not that, we start blaming the other for our problem. The person with a different gender, a different sexuality, speaks a different language, looks different, wears different clothes, is a social security beneficiary, lives in public housing. We start fighting amongst ourselves, forgetting that ultimately we are all in the same boat. Living in Australia in 2023 is like being on a rowboat with a canopy. But that canopy only covers a small portion of that boat. And there are people in that canopy eating and drinking and feasting and enjoying themselves and using the disposable income to get on in life, while the rest of us continue to row that boat, obeying the law, paying our taxes, doing what's expected of us, working to improve the life of the community, working as a volunteer, not creating a fuss. Ultimately, we've become part of the consume, defecate and die quietly section of society. We accept everything that's thrown at us, internalise it, and suffer the consequences. We suffer the consequences for increasing interest rates. We suffer the consequences for increased mortgages. We suffer the consequences for increased rents. We suffer the consequences if we're on a fixed income. We suffer the consequence if we're involved in small business. But ultimately, the 1% that own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication, and to a lesser degree, a much lesser degree, the 8% who've got disposable income to invest, suffer fewer consequences, and the 1% suffer no consequences. Now, people think because they've got superannuation, they are embedded in the system. I remember in Afghanistan during the war in Iraq, you had this concept, which was different to Vietnam, where you had freelance reporters who were not embedded in the United States military, who night after night after night showed us the brutality of the Vietnam War, the Cambodian War, the Laotian War. And it caused enough revulsion in Australia and the United States that war lost popular support, and those troops were eventually withdrawn. But the armed forces learnt their lessons. They don't want pesky freelance reporters, people like Mr. Assange, dumping material, highlighting their inadequacies and their criminality. No. They want tame, embedded reporters who go out with the military on their excursions and give us that one viewpoint. We see it over and over in the Ukraine, irrespective of what you think of the Ukrainians and what you think of the Russians. It's interesting how Russian media only concentrates on Russian troops and Russian demands, and the Ukrainian media concentrates on their angle. There's no independence. It's not that truth is the first casualty of war. What it is truth is the first casualty of living in a society based on a private investment for private profit model. We consistently find ourselves in a situation, as I said before, those who obey the laws, pay their taxes, do community work, tend to be losers. And those who exploit the system win handsomely. And nothing highlights this more than superannuation. Now, 99% of Australians think superannuation is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm part of the 1% which thinks it's the biggest con that we've seen in this country over the last 100 years. Instead of the state looking after you after you've worked all your life, what happens is that you forego 11 to 12% of your wages. They are invested in the very system which exploits you, and somehow you need to be grateful. And everybody thinks, just wait till I retire. Now it's 67. Soon it'll be 70. Just wait till I retire and I will be able to enjoy all that money. Well, boys and girls, it doesn't work that way, does it? If you get pregnant and you're out of the workforce, no superannuation. If you're unemployed, no superannuation. If you're sick, no superannuation. If you live in a society, if you are a low-wage earner, part-time casual work, minimal superannuation. If you're a politician or a public servant, you'll get a reasonable superannuation. And if you're part of the 1%, you use the superannuation system to legally minimise taxation and enjoy a great retirement. There is nothing magic about superannuation. As we saw in 2008 during the global financial crisis, you can lose it, most of it, within a day. So, let's get back to our original proposition. This increasing level of subterranean frustration, anger, violence, which we internalise, which destroys us as individuals, which has a significant impact on those around us, not just our family, but the people we work with. It blights our future. It restricts what we are able to do. And it's not a personal failing. It's based on the fact that we still believe in the private investment for private profit mantra. That somehow we think private enterprise is going to save us, despite the disgusting situation in the aged care sector, despite the corruption by providers as far as the National Disability Insurance Scheme is concerned, where money is wasted on providers and not enough is left over for the people who need those services. And every aspect of privatisation in this country over the last 40 years has resulted in higher prices and no return to the community. I had to laugh when Australia Post made a loss. It doesn't matter whether it makes a loss or a profit, it is a government entity. Cross-subsidisation is the name of the game. People who live in urban areas subsidise those who live in regional and rural areas. We have forgotten that government services are there to provide services to people. Services which the private sector can never provide. And while we continue to support the private investment for private profit mantra as the only way to move forward, we will continue to face a climate emergency. We will continue to face increasing inequality. We will continue to face a up and down, a roller coaster ride as far as the economy is concerned. One moment we're rich and happy, and the next moment we're the depths of despair. And the current crisis highlights that there's only one loser, and that's you. You and me. We're the losers. And we're the losers because we accept this economic model, because we are not willing to look outside the box at alternatives. Why not have a universal basic income for everybody? We could do it if we changed our taxation system and used our resources for us, as the Norwegians do, not use it for enrich the major shareholders in the private sector. I could go on, but I'm not going to. The fact is, ultimately, the type of society we have is dependent on you.